an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wizard's Dilemma. Pages 149 to 193, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening. Oh, this is very hard to read, guys. Monday night, Tuesday morning. No, I lied. You know what? Just those pages. That's what you get. In this section, I am very agitated at the fact that up to this point, Nita still has not told Kit what's going on. And I really want him to be in on this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Yama for commissioning this episode. I am sorry about the intro, but I only get, and this is something that some of you may know, if you use the desktop version of the Kindle, it doesn't list page numbers next to chapters, but it does if you use the app. So I was trying to open the book on the desktop so I could read from that while I record, and realized that I had to open it on my phone to get the proper chapters, and then I just couldn't keep up because the chapters are too long to show the entire title on the menu. Anyway, so this section is really sort of, this is one of those that's like a very obvious turn of events in terms of the Nita thinking about trying to save her mom using wizardry. And I'm not mad at that. Saying something that is obvious isn't an insult necessarily, because that's just something that you can't avoid when you write stories. There's patterns that things follow. But I do really enjoy the conversation that she winds up having with her mentors about how that works and why it's not something that she can take for granted can be done easily or without consequences. And I am much more concerned than Nita seems to be about whether or not her mother believes this is going to be worth it. Because she says, of course my mother will be willing to pay it. Why wouldn't she? And she's acting like her mother is going to be sort of seeing it in a black and white, like either do this or die. And her mother's going to be like, well, of course do this. But Nita's not really considering that the consequences of doing this may fall upon this woman's daughter. And if she isn't positive that her daughter is going to come out of it safely, she may not be willing to risk it the way that Nita anticipates. But Nita seems to be absolutely certain that her mother's going to have a sense of self-preservation that will override everything. And I kind of think Nita's going to be a little bit unpleasantly surprised when it comes right down to the thing and she realizes that her mother isn't exactly on board with the overall price. And that, I think, is something that a lot of us, as we get older, begin to realize that there are all kinds of times in our lives where we have to weigh things. This is part of why some people reject like getting chemotherapy as well, is because they would rather, if it looks like the odds are not good, control their own time of death or as close to it as they can, than wear themselves down in an attempt that will likely be futile, just to prolong their pain for no particular reason other than I have to try. And that is something that as I get older and I begin to see more of the result of people clinging to life because that is our instinct without particularly like looking at the quality of that life, there are really some times where I wonder if I would have chosen what they did. And I think Nita may have to face that. And it's not as if she hasn't faced these sorts of choices before, but this is family. This is different. And it's going to be out of her hands. You know, this is something that she has had to decide. But now she has to accept whatever her mother decides because it is her mother's life. And that is not an easy thing, to relinquish control of losing someone that means that much to you. It's not something that I think most of us can do with any sort of grace in the like first instinctual reactions. We may calm down and be like, oh, okay, no, I am not handling this well or taking you into account. And I do need to like focus on the fact that you are a person with your own desires but that often is secondary to our first, what the fuck? Are you serious? What's wrong with you? Kind of reaction. So anyway, we start off this section with Nita waking up, and it's a sort of odd wake where this will happen when you're extremely stressed and you fell asleep under conditions that are sort of buzzing around in your head. If there's a lot of anxiety going on, you will fall asleep with those thoughts circling, and you will wake up with those thoughts still circling. And in some ways, it will not feel like you fell asleep at all. And it's before dawn, you know, there's just like, there's barely any light up outside. And Nita looks at her manual, and this winds up being absolutely key. The words that come to mind are, I will fight to preserve what grows and lives well in its own way. I will not change any creature unless its growth and life, or that of the system of which it is part, are threatened and it's cut off. And she says, I am a wizard, and if my mom's life isn't threatened right now, I don't know when it will be. There has got to be a way to fight this other than what they've got in the hospital, and I'm going to find out what it is. And she winds up, and I'll get there later because I want to directly quote it, but she winds up finding out that her mother's life is not the only life in this equation that she has to factor in. And honestly, it just is really unfair. It's really, really unfair. And I get it. You know, it is what it is. It is unfair. You have to, at some points in your life, just acknowledge, yes, indeed it is unfair, and move right past it. It's a terrible thing when you reach the point where you begin to realize that fairness does not factor into things. That's not the way anything in the world is set up. There is an overall balance that I believe the universe attempts to create. But that balance is possible to upset it and need to bring it back into balance. And in the upset, that is often where the unfairness lies. So balancing it out will wind up sort of, I think, evening the energy out. But that's not going to necessarily be manifested in the kind of, quote, justice or fairness that we think of when we are imagining what that looks like. And that can be incredibly discouraging. That's something that I particularly, listen, I'm a Libra. Fairness is a big deal to me. I want there to be justice. And when that does not happen, it feels like we should just give up then. If the world can't be fair, what are we even doing here? That's honestly the attitude that I will have sometimes, is just, well, fuck it. We don't deserve this then. We don't deserve anything. If we can't even get this basic shit right, fuck us. And honestly, I still kind of feel that way. But in moments like this, especially. So Nita, when she picks up her manual, she finds the message from Kit, and she tells herself, I'll get in touch with him later. No point in waking him up early just to get him upset. I've done enough stupid stuff to him lately. And I really like the way that this whole thing is written, because it gave me continual anxiety, when her and Kit kept missing each other. And when they kept, like, he thinks he sees her at school, but she's wearing a skirt that is shorter than what he thinks she would normally wear. And so he's like, oh no, that can't be her. Little moments like this. I wanted so much for them to meet up and straighten things out. However, I do think that the way this is written is really, really believable, and it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like, for example, Nita has realized that the fight that they got in before, where she was telling Kit that he wasn't listening to her about such and such with creating that spell to clean the water out, she has realized that she was wrong and admits that, and is feeling pretty stupid, actually, for the fact that she didn't see sooner how wrong she was. And because of that, it makes them missing one another feel a lot more earned and tragic in a way. Rather, this author could have had them get in this fight, have Nita be super stubborn and not see her own fault in the thing, and then decide that she doesn't want to respond to him because she's still mad at him. And while that's a valid way to handle it in a sort of abstract sense, I would have been so irritated by that, you guys. I really would. Like, it's a combination of things. It's, first of all, that she would be that petty, but it's also that she would be denying herself the support that she would need. And instead, what we're getting is her feeling bad enough that she doesn't want to continue to fuck up. So she pulls back from him in an effort to protect him from her a little bit, because she knows that she's not totally thinking clearly right now, which rings really true. This is something that I struggle with also. I get very overwhelmed when I have to communicate with people sometimes. And in the job that I have to communicate a lot. And so I'll have all of these like texts that I need to respond to, or all of these messages or emails that I really want to word right, because I know that this person is asking me something important, or I know that they're in a bad place, and I want to give them the attention that they deserve. And that often translates to me being like, now isn't a good time though. I'm going to get back to them a little later when I've got more time. And it will turn out that I didn't have time for 4 days. And that text has just been sitting there. And then I realize, oh my God, it's been so long, and I just have to do it. And this is just super, super relatable to me, that she keeps on being like, now is not a good time. I really do want to talk to him. I genuinely do. But I don't know what to say right now. And I have this other thing that's very urgent that I want to give all of my attention to. So as much as it bums me out entirely that by the end of this section, they still haven't spoken about this, Kit still doesn't know what's going on, it feels totally reasonable and genuine that it's happening. And that's part of what makes it so terrible, because she needs the help right now. She needs the support right now. And she's over here potentially making the same mistake that she did with that other spell. She might be creating the same, like, overworked, overwrought, over intricate spell, when it's something that could actually be much simpler than that. And she knows, she says something about that spell and the fact that she overthought it. So it's possible she's taking that into consideration and she's not making that same mistake again. But 2 heads are always going to be better than 1. It's always good to have somebody around to be like, I don't know about that though. And I just hope that if she has learned her lesson about trusting Kit a little bit more and not taking it quite so personally, that if he did suggest a different way of doing things, she would hear him rather than lashing out because of the high stakes surrounding the fact that this is all about her mom. So, all right. let's see. She paged through the manual to the section with information on the medical and healing related wizardries. That section was much larger this morning than she had ever found it before. Nita began reading what there was with intensity and a concentration she could hardly remember having expended since she first found this book and understood what it meant. She had a couple of hours to spare before the time her dad had told her to wake him up. She used them, pausing only once to go to the bathroom. To say that the subject was complex was understating it badly. There was just too much information. She had the manual stop displaying everything that had to do with injuries and trauma, chronic disease, and afflictions. And though she narrowed her focus, the section she was reading didn't get any thinner. Finally, there was almost nothing between the covers except pages and pages of material concerning abnormal growths and lesions, and still she found more every time she targeted a specific condition. Nita also saw a lot of a word in the speech that she didn't much like, a word that translated into English as intractable. There was a lot of discussion of theory here, but not many spells. Nita got nervous when she noticed that, but she didn't stop reading. There had to be a way. There was always a way. So eventually her father wakes up and... Or actually, she's the one who wakes him up, because when she goes to see him in his room, he's sitting in his reading chair, and it does not seem like he actually went to bed at all, which honestly, I can understand. So she tells him that she's trying to figure out if she can do something. And when he doesn't seem to understand what she means, she has to be like, Dad, remember about that whole thing where I'm a wizard and my sister's also a wizard? I don't know why you're acting like this doesn't make any sense to you, but that's kind of a big deal. And he is very honest with her and is like, look, I honestly kind of do forget, because I make myself not think about it, because it's a little bit overwhelming for me to consider what you guys are out there doing. So I have to detach myself from that a little bit. And he says that's in the best of times. And right now, I mean, the idea that you can do something, it's not like he doesn't want her to try. It's more about the fact that he's like, I think it's just the worry of getting his hopes up, you know, getting hope to that you are going to get your heart's desire, and not getting that is a crushing thing. Now, this is one of those things where it's the eternal question. Would you rather get your hopes up and be crushed, or would you rather live without any hope? And thus, when you are, quote, crushed, it doesn't crush as much because you weren't as high up as you would have been. But I have always been, and continue to be even now, a proponent of living with hope is worth the price of potentially getting crushed. A life without it is pointless. If you don't have any faith that things will work out in any way, and you don't have to believe the world will be fixed or anything, but if you don't have any faith, what are you doing here? That's no good for you, and that's no good for anyone around you. So sometimes living, and really living, means risking yourself and putting yourself out there by letting yourself have hope when you know the outcome isn't certain. That's part of the deal. And I think that's what he sort of begins to realize as they like talk this through. So he says, in the meantime, let's get over to the hospital. And when they get there, her mother is sleeping. And this is another thing that I liked, because a lot of times this is what happens when you go to visit people who are suffering from a terminal illness, who are going through like a kind of major medical issue. When you go and visit them, you've like worked yourself up to seeing them, and then you'll get there and they'll be asleep, and it will be very important that they stay asleep. So it's not like you can come in and wake them up and then they can just go back to sleep once you leave. you have to choose between your own time that you took to go and see, and whether or not that outweighs their necessity of getting rest in order to heal. And they wind up, the fact that her mother is asleep sort of works for what happens with Darine. But I just really did like the fact that this wasn't necessarily the kind of visit that Nita had been expecting. So they leave Nita, Nita leaves her father talking to the doctor who wants to speak with him alone. And she comes back to find them mid-conversation, and the doctor sort of catches her up and tells her about, she sort of consults with Nita's father about whether or not they should be here for this. And he tells her they're both, mature girls and they have a right to know. However, the doctor does ask where Darine is, and Nita's looking around like, what is she doing? And she comes back to her mother's room and she finds Darine standing by the bed holding Spot, and there is a sizzling feeling in the air that either signals a wizardry that has recently been dismantled, a wizardry that is unfinished, or a wizardry that has failed. And Nita is disgusted, and she kind of lays into her sister later. But at this moment, she doesn't have time to talk about this. So they go back in front of this doctor, and she explains that their mother does have a brain tumor. It is usually malignant. It invades nearby tissue quickly and destructively. Its growth is very invasive and very fast. The only way we're going to be 100% sure is to do a biopsy. But I do want you to know that the tumor can be removed, and that will help because there's a lot of pressure building because of it on her brain. But the thing is, the way that it spreads is that it seeds itself into other organs. And there is potential that this has spread. And we don't know and won't know until we keep an eye on things. And we will have to we'll have to start with chemotherapy to get at whatever might have seeded itself throughout her system. So last time I recorded, I told you guys about how strange it was that I read a chapter where she finds out this news on the same day, within the same hour, practically, that I had found out Owen's grandmother has cancer and needed surgery. Her cancer was endometrial, and thus she was scheduled for a hysterectomy to have her uterus removed, and they trusted that they got it all. And the day before yesterday, we found out that they didn't. They didn't get it all. It was something like this that seeds itself in other places, and she is going to have to undergo chemotherapy after all, which we had all really hoped to avoid, because anybody who has seen someone go through it or gone through it themselves knows chemo is as brutal as cancer. It's really rough. And if you don't have to, you do not want to. The fact that she will be undergoing this chemotherapy for as long as she will meant that we had to push our wedding back until next year, because there is absolutely no question about having the wedding without her there. And it just broke me up to know that, she went through this surgery, and while that got the mass out, going through that was just one of the steps. And I hated the knowledge that they're operating under the same sort of theory as these doctors are in this story, where they're just kind of like, we need to do our best to cover our bases because who knows where it could be setting up shop. We don't. We can't even necessarily like target areas. We just have to hope if we circle or cycle this poison through your system that it eventually gets at it. Ugh, it's brutal. So Nita, when they use the word cancer, she realizes that it had come up repeatedly in her research that morning and that she had been purposely avoiding it. And now she begins to understand that purposefully avoiding the thing probably hindered her research terribly, that it was super important that she face up to what she was actually dealing with, and that she has sabotaged herself in her research a little bit. And she may need to go back and like square up again. And when they ask what her chances are, the doctor says that it's too soon to tell, which is the kind of thing that I believe you say when you don't think their chances are good, but you're hoping things will turn around, and that there is a chance it may turn around, but you just don't want to put that out there because you don't want to let people down. And I do like the fact that she offers to show Nita some diagrams of the tumor and where it is located and what kind of like procedure the surgeons will follow. It was nice for her to treat Nita like she gets to understand this information. She's not, I just really appreciated that. And they believe the surgery will be Wednesday or Thursday. So now it's kind of understandable the way that this book's titles of chapters are set up according to days of the week. So they get dropped off at home, and she tells him that they are probably going to be out when he gets back because they are going to be working on some stuff and finding some information. And Nita, when she's left alone with Doreen, stops her and says, I want you to tell me what you were doing in there. Something, Doreen said, which was more than you were. And Nita wants to hit her. She thinks about it for realsies and has to stop and be like, yo, what the fuck? And Nita follows after her and is like, you were just doing a wizardry right in the middle of the fucking... Are you serious? There were people around and you failed. And when she finally says I was trying to cure her, she's like, you didn't know anything about what you were dealing with. You didn't know what kind of growth it was yet. We hadn't talked to the doctor. What are you doing? And Doreen is like, I have this power that's ebbing with every day that passes, and I need to use it while I can. And Nita's like, yeah, while you can. And when you don't have any fucking information is not when you can. You idiot. She's super, super mad. And Doreen just says, it doesn't matter. It didn't work. And then how can it not have worked? This isn't even anything like pushing a planet around. So they get to Tom and Carl's house, and there's this giant slug that's talking to Carl at the time when they get there. And Tom is like, what is up with you two? You guys, I can feel it coming off you that you are upset. And Nita tells him, and he just kind of sits down in response and is just shocked. And he says it explains something Carl noticed an hour or so ago. And Carl comes over and says, yeah, I thought that was you. And he looks at Doreen and she says, well, it didn't work. And he's like, oh, it didn't? Really? I'm shocked. There's only a million reasons why it didn't. And I'm going to read this because I just love it. Inadequate preparation, no concrete circle when so many variables were involved, insufficiently defined intervention locus on both volume and tissue type, other unprotected living entities in the field of possible effects, inadequate protection for the wizardry against material memory of the past traumas in the area. Shall I go on? Major screw up, Darine. I expect better of you. And Nita, when she sees him, she realizes that she has never seen Carl pissed off before, and really gets a little bit shook by that, at this realization that she has never seen that expression on his face. And that's a real thing. When you see a person exhibit an emotion that they just never do, it is a startling thing. So Carl is like, look, I get it. You're trying to do this thing that's like taking a lot of power and you're panicking. But the truth is, what's going on with you losing your power levels is the way it's supposed to work. This is correct. And you started really, really big. And this is a comparatively small wizardry, which is not something that you have a lot of experience in, because you've just been out here doing major earth-shattering shit, and this small, low-level stuff that takes a ton of concentration and finesse is not something that you have any experience in. And because of that, he says Nita is going to be the one that handles this, and that Darine is going to have to sit back and watch and hope for the best, because if she interferes, it could kill all three of them. And this is when Darine says it's not fair. No, said Tom. So let's agree that it's not. Then move past that to some kind of solution, if indeed there is one. And Nita gets mad and says, if, in this way that she's like, how could you even say that? And she says, a spell always works. I don't get it. Why did I keep coming across the words intractable or recalcitrant? And Tom explains that cancer is not something that you can stop its growth and it will stay stopped. This is something that the problem will change. And it will be often as a direct result of the attempt to get rid of it, which means that it will respond in much the way superbugs respond to antibiotics if they are not adequate, or if they are maybe the wrong type. They will build up an immunity to that magic and come back bigger and badder and more fatal than they were before. So Tom says, you've done some medical wizardry in the past. Tissue regeneration is fairly simple. There's always a price. Blood, either in actual form or expressed by your agreement to suffer the square of the pain you're intending to heal. That's the normal arrangement. But when you start involving non-human life, things get complicated. And she's like, what the fuck, dude? My mom is a human. And Carl fills in the gap and is like, the cancer is also a life. It's caused by something. So if that isn't addressed and you just address the cancer itself, the cause is going to continue manifesting. And he says the main problem is that cancer cells are not all inanimate nor all biological. They are a hybrid, which causes problems when trying to write a spell that will eradicate them without hurting normal cells. It's exactly the same thing that makes chemotherapy slightly dangerous. It poisons the good cells as well as the bad ones unless it's very carefully managed. And this is when Carl explains about it getting worse. They get smarter and nastier. What comes back will kill you faster than what was there originally. And let's see. Carl, there are ways to attempt a cure, but the price is high. If it weren't, there wouldn't be much cancer. We'd be stomping it out with ease wherever we found it. And the basic part of the problem leaves us, in some ways, even less able to do anything than the medical people. We're wizards. Viruses, though they're not exactly organic life, are life regardless. And we cannot just go around killing things without dealing with the consequences at every level. Understandably, Dareen's reaction to this is disbelief. She says, oh, come on. The idea that we are supposed to value the lives of cancer cells at the same level as my mom's life. And Carl's like, dude, we are. That's the thing about being a wizard. And that's like a really easy oath to take when you're not thinking about the realities of situations like this, but that's exactly what it means. You don't know where to draw the line if you do decide to ever just like hold one form of life above another. That will keep happening, and you will keep applying your own judgment, which is going to be naturally very blinkered and unobjective to the worth of life. And that is not the way to be. You respect all life or none of it. Of course, that doesn't mean that wizards never kill, but killing increases entropy locally, and it's always to be resisted. Sometimes you must kill in order to save another life, but you must first make your peace with the life form you're killing. Viruses have their own worldview. Reproduce at any cost, which also can mean kill your host. In dealing with that kind of thing, a wizard is handicapped right from the start. Everything that lives also knows the speech and can use it to tell you how life feels for it, how its universe makes it behave. And Nita realizes that what he's saying is that when she communicates with this life form, it will be able to explain to her that it's not its fault. This is how it was made. This is what it does. And it cannot help that. And how do you explain to them that what they are doing is not okay when it's not a judgment call on their part to be doing it in the first place. It's simply how things work for them. Basically, you would be asking it to stop existing. And why would it? Nothing is interested in its own annihilation, you know? So Nita asks Tom, is it possible to change a cancer virus's perception of the world, change the way the universe is for them, so that they're more sentient, so that a wizard could deal with them to best effect, talk them out of being there, talk them out of killing? And Carl says, if they're old enough to ask, and Tom finishes, they're old enough to be told. Nita, I couldn't ask about this before. Who are you thinking of doing this wizardry for? Your mother or you? And Nita sits there for a second trying to think of how to respond. And Carl is just like, don't even try to talk to me yet about your intentions here. You are a mess. You only just found out about this yesterday. You don't have a real answer yet. You need to think it over, because that is incredibly important here. If you are doing this to serve yourself, that is not how being a wizard is meant to work. You have been given the abilities you have in order to serve other beings. And if your mother isn't the one that's coming first here, but you lie to yourself about it and write a spell where you behave as if she is when you know in your heart it's for you, that will be a break in the wizardry. You will poison it, essentially. And it might not be evident that you have poisoned that spell until you go to do it, and it could kill you. So Nita takes this to heart. I mean, I will give her credit. This is not shit you want to fucking hear. Like, let's be honest. But she is, like, really serious about this. This is something that I appreciate, because I think a lot of stories are done in such a way that a person is absolutely so wound up over the idea of losing someone that they love that they get very reckless about what they'll do in order to save that person. And that never really rang true to me. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen, because I am certain it does. I just mean in terms of my personality and how I would behave. I am somebody who I want to be 100% sure before I take action. If it's something that's that high stakes, I need to be 100%. And the idea of being reckless when somebody you love's life is on the line doesn't wash for me. I wouldn't, like, that is the opposite of how I handle everything in life. I always take decisions seriously, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be dialed up to 11 when it's about losing a loved one. So for me, being able to sit and really listen to the advice you're being given, really hear the caution, the potential pitfalls that are being outlined for you, this is crucial. And I am so glad that Nita doesn't reject what they're saying, that she doesn't, there's some times where she expresses, skepticism's the wrong word, but she expresses, I will say, honestly, just curiosity, where she's just like, I don't get it. Why is it like that? And they give her an answer that she doesn't want. And she internalizes it and really seems to, like, get it by the end. And that's part of what's so frustrating for her, is that they're making an argument she understands. So she can't just, hand wave that. So Nita says, what I would be trying to do is change the way things behave in the universe. And Tom says, changing the structure of the universe itself. Yes, you get to play God on a local level. And what is your mother's life worth to you? The option has dangers. We have to warn you and let you know very clearly what you're up against. We know that you've been through some shit. Your ordeals have been serious. That is to say that we have seen, for your age, things you've had to give up and sacrifice, or be prepared to sacrifice. And he says, I have news for you. You haven't yet played with anything like this. When you start altering the natural laws of universes, it's like throwing a rock into a pond. Ripples spread, and the first thing in the local system to be affected, the first thing the ripples hit, is you. You're going to need to practice handling that, keeping yourself as you are in the face of everything changing before trying it for real. And unfortunately, in this universe, everything is for real. And they recommend going somewhere that this is not for real to practice. And of course, the first thing that I think of is Kit's little trip into this, like, odd side world, which we will talk about in a moment. And basically Tom's like, now I know I said go somewhere not real, but it will be real. The thing is, if you make mistakes there, it's sort of sandboxed so that it won't kill anyone else in the process, or potentially kill you yourself. And she wants to go immediately. They have to tell her to be patient, and she tries to argue, and they have to interrupt and say, your mother isn't going to die today or tomorrow. And she calms down and gets a hold of herself. And Carl looks at her very approvingly, seeing her doing that, and is like, good, because that is precisely the mindset that you need to be in. You need to have control of yourself, because if you let yourself fly off the handle, what you're doing, that's not going to work out for you. Not for her, not for you. So it turns out that it's a world gating at Grand Central Station, and that her manual will have most of the details. And Tom says there's going to be basically a course set up. And if you've finished it and you did it correctly, you'll be able to come back and recast that spell in this universe if you still want to. And that if Nita's like, I just can't imagine why I wouldn't want to. I really do like that moment of her just, what are you even talking about? She'd noticed over time that sometimes Tom and Carl spent a lot of effort warning you about things that weren't going to happen. I mean, yeah, but like, maybe they would if, you know, you were smarter about it or thinking more clearly. So they talk about creating like a weird sort of wizard backpack. And this is such a weird thing. Normally, you'd read the manual, construct the spells you need on the spot, but that won't work where you're going. In the practice universes, time runs at a different speed, so the manual can be unpredictable about updating, and you can't wait for it when you're in the middle of some wizardry where speed of execution is crucial. Your manual will have details on what the Matrix needs to do, and what it looks like is up to you. If you go forward on this course, there's going to come a time where you're going to have to ask your mother whether this is a price she wants you to pay. And she's like, oh, yeah, no problem. What's the price, though? And Tom's like, dude, that's sort of the point. We don't know. You don't know. You have to find out. That's part of the deal. And then another great moment. Nita says, okay, I'll get started as soon as I get home. And then bursts into tears. And it's just so unexpected for her. And she just, you know, I really loved it. It's so true in terms of how grief is and how it works. It will just fucking edge its way up behind you and bash you over the back of the head. Like, there's no warning to it. There doesn't seem to be any particular rhyme or reason to it. It can just be that way. And it's relatable. So the chapter ends with Carl saying, be careful. There are occupational hazards to being a god. So we go into Sunday afternoon and evening. Nita sits down at her manual and begins to work. And she gets super absorbed in this because, again, she had said that she would get back to Kit later on in the day when it wasn't so early. And she hasn't thought about him once. It is sweet out of her head. And that she finds out that in these like sort of playpen universes, it says, universes not permanently inhabited by intelligent life have only a limited toleration for the presence of sentience. The behavior of local physics within these universes can become skewed or deranged when overloaded by too many sentient hours of use in a given period. In extreme cases, such over-inhabitation can cause an aesthetic continuum to explode. No, sorry, to implode. Woof. Yeah, that's a fucking warning if I ever heard one. So then we get access scheduling is arranged through manual functions from the originating universe. Payment for the gating is determined by duration spent in the, I don't know how to say this, esquesso continuum? I don't know about that. And deducted from the practitioner at the end of each session. Access is through local mainline gating facilities of complexity level 11 or better and the gating type is a diazo-Riemannian time slide, which, regardless of duration spent in the ascetic continuum, returns practitioners to the originating universe an average of plus 0.10 planetary rotations along duration axis, variation plus or minus 0.5 rotation. So, let's talk about this. Deducted from the practitioner at the end of each session. Let's say she is being asked to repay the exact pain that she is attempting to save her mother from experiencing. Will she age herself? Will she hurt herself, like genuinely hurt herself over and over again? Will this eat away at her? Is that how this works ever? Nita did the conversion from the decimal timings, raising her eyebrows. So you go in, then come out more or less 2 hours after you went, no matter how much time you spend there. Could get tiring. Ask me if I care. And that's the sort of thing that I think is really a small detail that sounds like it's just going to be maybe a little like weird to read about, but could potentially be devastating. 2 hours can make or break a day. Ask anybody who has a lot to do. And potentially, if she goes in there and she only spends 10 minutes of her own time, but she comes out and it's been 2 hours, like, that's a big sacrifice to make. And how many times does she have to do it? How many times does she have to try this before knowing if it works or not? Like, yikes. So she starts creating this this spell that basically forms itself, or she forms it into what looks like a sort of bangle bracelet, or a tennis bracelet, I think. And it takes her a while and is very like time consuming, very repetitive to a point of being almost hypnotic. And it does sort of like hurt her hands after a while in a way that she compares to having done crochet and quitting because it just hurt. And finally, she starts to really get into the rhythm of it and gets interrupted by her dad coming in and is kind of like glad finally because it has been a minute. And he sees the spell sitting there on the bed and picks it up and is just really like, what on earth? What is this? And she says, I am going to work on this until I fucking get it right. I don't know that it will work, but it's always worth trying. And I'm just going to keep doing it. So, and he tells her also that he thinks that she and Doreen should continue going to school and keeping up their routine because he believes that that's going to be really important to all of them. He's also going to keep on going to work kind of thing. So then we jump to Kit's POV, and he is wondering where Nita is, but he's not being an asshole about it. It's not like... I really thought he was going to start being like, dude, what the fuck? Why isn't she texting me back? And he says, I guess I could always shoot her a thought. And he backs his chair out and is about to do that. And he knocks his chair into Paunch and wakes him up, and he gets interested in going outside. And when he tries to connect his brain, he hears this sort of like rhythmic humming. And he doesn't recognize it at all. He doesn't know what she's doing. It says the noise had a faint taste of wizardry about it, but there was also an emotional component, a turmoil of extreme nervousness, but blocked, stifled. He couldn't make anything of it. That concerns me a great deal. That he is like, oh, there's a bit of wizardry mixed up in that miasma of fucking anxiety, I guess. ooh, I don't feel like that bodes super well for this fucking spell. But, so he gets up and says that he's going to go to Nita's place. When he gets to the house, they are not there. The car is gone. And he's thinking maybe they went to the movies or something. I guess she'll just get back to me. Bunch of things like this. And he leaves another message on the manual. Tried to reach you earlier, but you sounded busy. Call when you can. And he's about to say, see you at school tomorrow. And he sort of realizes that he doesn't know if he's going to see her in school tomorrow because they've grown so apart in the classes that they're taking. And they don't even have lunch together anymore. So they may never see each other throughout the day, which is something in my school would never happen. Even if you don't have classes together, you still have a good amount of time between. And my school wasn't that big. I think my graduating class was something like 300. So it was pretty easy to like run across everybody. So she is in the, wait, did I finish this one? Yeah. So Monday morning and afternoon, Nita wakes up and is just kind of thinking over the way this wizardry works and looking through the structure of this matrix that she is meant to have created. And Darine comes in and it's like, oh, wow, are you done already? And Nita sort of snaps a little and it's like, yeah, I am. I'm doing something. And I would appreciate you not fucking insinuating that again. And Darine has to sort of take that one on the chin and then be like, she admits, I can't stand having to just sit here and hope that you get it right. Like, this sucks. And Nita's laughing because she's like, yeah, well, welcome to how all of us have felt with you a bunch of times recently. And Nita is like about to get dressed for school. She runs across the shirt that she had, or the skirt that she had to argue with her mother to get because her mom thought it was too short. And she almost doesn't wear it. And then she's like, mom is going to be all vindicated though. I can't have that. So she puts that skirt on, which is what later causes Kit to think that can't be her because he says Nita doesn't wear skirts that short. And then his brain follows up and it's a shame. And he sort of winces at himself and is like, God damn it. When am I going to stop with that? And he had talked to his dad about it. And his dad is basically like, oh, yeah, that'll happen. It's going to keep happening. So sorry, buddy. And honestly, that kind of tickled me because, yeah, sorry, buddy. But it's interesting to know that he sees Nita that way at all. And Nita stops at Carl's before school and winds up having him take a look at the bracelet overall. And he seems to think that this is, solid enough to give it a shot. And I don't know. I like the fact that she's consulting so closely with them on all of this, So I am out of time almost. I'm going to wrap up with the conversation between Tom and Kit. And Tom tells Kit that all of the places that he made in this little pocket universe are still there. The presses of the data from when he went on his jaunt is 1,000 pages long. There is a ton of information. And everybody sort of thought this stuff would go away. So now there are all these theoretical wizards that don't know what to make of things because he somehow created out of nothingness and they don't understand how that's possible, how that could happen. So basically Kit's worried that he has fucked things up somehow. And he asks if it's going to be a problem. For the average wizard in the street? No, Tom said. But I think you should have a talk with Ponch to keep him from running off and creating universes on his own. We don't know how stable these universes are, and we don't know if they might not be able to proliferate. And Kit's like, what the they breed? How is that possible? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but absolutely. And you just need to check on that. And we are going to have to figure that part out. And they have a little moment of commiserating over how much gym class sucks. So let's see. Oh, right. I forgot. It ends with Kit, and he makes another attempt to get in touch with Nita, and it's like 8 p.m. and she's already asleep. And he's like, this is really weird. I do not know what's happening. And he leaves the house with Paunch, and his sister's asking where he's going. And he says, out to walk the dog. So, yeah, that is the end of that section. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate that you guys are all excited for these chapters because it seems like a very popular series. Thank you again to Yama for commissioning this. I hope you have been enjoying, and I will see you soon with a new one. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.